My mom reported me for rebelling against her partner. My mom reported me for rebelling against her partner. It all started when my mom met Blake at a coffee shop in downtown Portland. At first, he seemed like a dream come true, one of those guys who knows exactly how to charm his way through first dinners and family barbecues. He brought mom sunflowers, remembered her favorite Thai takeout from Bangkok Garden, and even complimented my AP history grades. But behind that perfect smile and those carefully chosen words, there was something else lurking. Something I noticed long before she did. I'm Willow, and I was 16 when Blake walked into our lives like he owned the place. Mom had been single for 3 years after Dad left, and she was hungry for companionship. Blake was 42, worked in construction management, and drove a shiny black Ford F-150 that he kept spotless. He had this way of filling up our small ranch house in Hillsboro with his presence, making everything feel smaller somehow. The red flags started small. Blake didn't hit me, not with his hands anyway, but he looked at me like he wanted to. His comments began subtly, wrapped in what sounded like concern. That outfit isn't really appropriate for a girl your age, is it, Willow? He'd say, eyeing my ripped jeans and vintage band t-shirt. Why do you wear so much makeup to school? You're prettier without all that stuff on your face. When I wore my favorite denim skirt, the one I'd saved 3 months of babysitting money to buy, he'd shake his head and mutter, walking around dressed like that, people might get the wrong idea about what kind of girl you are. Each comment made me shrink a little more. I tried to become invisible, slipping through our house like a ghost, but it was useless. Any gesture, any word, any breath seemed to be enough for him to explode into one of his lectures about respect and proper behavior. When I finally worked up the courage to tell Mom what was happening, she sighed and asked me not to exaggerate. Blake's just old-fashioned, honey. He grew up differently than we did. Can't you try to be patient? He's making such an effort to fit in with our family. And there it was, I was the problem. I was the difficult daughter, the one who needed to adapt, to bend, to disappear if necessary. Mom started using phrases like meet him halfway, and pick your battles. She'd say Blake was learning to be a stepdad, as if terrorizing me was just part of some natural adjustment period. The worst part wasn't even Blake's behavior, it was watching my mom transform. The woman who used to defend me against playground bullies and difficult teachers now asked me to try harder with the man who was systematically tearing me down. She stopped asking how my day went. She stopped noticing when I came home from school with red eyes. She stopped being my mom and became Blake's girlfriend instead. Over time, Blake stopped asking for changes. He started demanding them. And Mom? She just watched it happen, choosing her new boyfriend over the daughter she'd raised for 16 years. But I didn't know yet just how far she'd go to protect him. That part came later, and it nearly destroyed me. 3 months after Blake moved in, the requests became commands. Willow, answer me when I'm talking to you. He'd bellow from the living room if I didn't respond within seconds. His voice would echo through our house like thunder, making the windows seem to rattle. I'd freeze wherever I was, doing homework at the kitchen table, grabbing a snack from the fridge, or just trying to get to my room, and feel my heart start hammering against my ribs. The house rules multiplied daily. Make your bed with hospital corners, no wrinkles allowed. Don't leave your phone on the kitchen counter, ever. Wash your dishes immediately after eating, not 5 minutes later. Keep your music below level 3 on your speaker. Be home by 9 p.m. on weekends, 8 on school nights. Each rule came with consequences that Blake delivered with the precision of someone who'd studied exactly how far he could push without crossing legal lines. I tried to comply, really I did. But perfection is impossible when someone's determined to find your failures. One Tuesday afternoon in October, I came home from volleyball practice exhausted and hungry. I'd made the varsity team as a sophomore, something I was proud of, but Blake had already made it clear that my little sports hobby shouldn't interfere with household responsibilities. I grabbed leftover pizza from the fridge and headed upstairs to start homework. 10 minutes later, Blake's voice boomed through the house. Willow, get down here now. I found him standing in the kitchen, holding my plate like evidence in a courtroom. What is this? He demanded. My plate. I stammered. Your dirty plate that you left on the counter instead of washing immediately. His face was turning red, the vein in his forehead bulging. How many times do I have to explain basic respect to you? I was going to come back down and... You were going to ignore the rules like you always do. You think because you're some hotshot volleyball player, you can just do whatever you want in my house. My house. The words hit me like a slap. This was the house where Mom and I had lived for 8 years. Where we'd painted my bedroom walls purple together. Where she'd held me when I cried about Dad leaving. But now it was Blake's house, and I was just a tenant who couldn't even eat pizza without permission. The breaking point came 2 weeks later. Blake had been particularly wound up that day, something about a problem at his construction site. I was in my room, door closed, doing calculus homework with music playing softly. Suddenly, my door flew open without a knock. "Turn that garbage off," Blake commanded. "I can hear it from downstairs." I looked at my phone. The volume was at level 2, well below his stated limit of 3. "It's only at level 2, I said quietly. That's when he grabbed my favorite shirt, a vintage Nirvana tee I'd found at Goodwill, and ripped it down the middle. The sound of tearing fabric filled my room like violence. He threw the destroyed shirt at my feet while Mom stood in the doorway, watching. "Maybe now you'll learn to listen the first time," Blake said. Mom said nothing. She just watched as he walked past her and down the hall. She didn't ask if I was okay. She didn't apologize. She didn't even meet my eyes. That night, I realized I was truly alone. The incident with my shirt should have been Mom's wake-up call. Instead, she acted like it never happened. The next morning, she was making Blake's coffee and packing his lunch like everything was normal. When I tried to bring it up, she cut me off with, "Willow, can we please not start drama this early in the morning?" Drama. That's what she called her boyfriend destroying my property while she watched. I stopped trying to reason with her after that. What was the point? Blake had won. He'd successfully convinced my mom that I was the problem, that my very existence was an inconvenience in their perfect little love story. I started spending more time away from home, staying after school for study groups I didn't need, volunteering at the animal shelter on weekends, sleeping over at my best friend Casey's house whenever her parents would allow it. Mrs. Rodriguez, my AP literature teacher, started noticing my absences and asking gentle questions. "Everything okay at home, Willow? You seem distracted lately." I'd give her vague answers about adjusting to changes, but I could see the concern in her eyes. She was the only adult who seemed to notice that something was wrong. The explosion came on a Thursday night in November. I'd been at Casey's house working on a group project and lost track of time. When I walked through the front door at 9:15 p.m., 15 minutes past Blake's arbitrary curfew, he was waiting in the living room like a predator. "Where the hell have you been?" he demanded. "Working on a school project. I'm sorry I'm late, Don't lie to me. I called Casey's house an hour ago. Her mom said you left at 8:30. Where were you for 45 minutes? I stared at him, confused. "I stopped at McDonald's for dinner. I have the receipt." "You stopped to meet some boy, didn't you? That's what this is about. All this defiance, this attitude, you're acting out because you want male attention." The accusation hit me like ice water. "What? No. I bought a Big Mac meal and came straight home. Don't you dare raise your voice at me in my house. This isn't your house." The words exploded out of me before I could stop them. "You've been here 6 months. This is my home. I've lived here my whole life." Blake's face went purple. He stepped toward me, and for a moment, I thought he might actually hit me. Instead, he grabbed a plate from the coffee table, one I'd left there after eating a sandwich earlier, and hurled it at the wall behind my head. It shattered into pieces, ceramic shards flying everywhere. "You're an ungrateful little brat," he snarled. "Your mother works her ass off to provide for you, and this is how you show respect? By coming home whenever you feel like it and screaming at the man who's trying to help raise you." That's when I completely lost it. 3 months of swallowed insults, destroyed belongings, and watching my mom choose him over me every single day came pouring out. "Help raise me," I screamed. "You're not helping anyone. You're a controlling pig who gets off on intimidating a 16-year-old girl. And you, Mom," I turned to where she stood frozen in the kitchen doorway, "you're pathetic for defending him." The slap came so fast I didn't see it coming. Mom's hand connected with my cheek with a crack that seemed to echo through the house. For a moment, we all stood there in shocked silence. Then I ran to my room and slammed the door. After that night, everything changed. The fragile peace we'd maintained, built on my silence and compliance, was shattered like that plate Blake had thrown. Mom stopped pretending to be neutral. She was firmly on Team Blake now, and I was the enemy they needed to defeat. I started avoiding home completely. I'd leave for school at 7 a.m. and not return until dinner time, if at all. Casey's parents, the Millers, started letting me stay over on school nights when I claimed we had big projects due. Mrs. Rodriguez began keeping me after class, ostensibly to discuss my essays, but really to check on my well-being. She was the only adult in my life who seemed to see past my fake smiles and everything's fine responses. One afternoon in December, she asked me to stay after class. "Willow, I'm worried about you," she said gently. "Your grades are still excellent, but you seem different. Withdrawn. Is everything okay at home?" Something about the way she asked, without judgment, with genuine concern, broke down my defenses. I told her a little bit. Not everything, but enough. The constant criticism, the destroyed shirt, the impossible rules, the way Blake looked at me like I was prey. I didn't mention the plate throwing or the slap, but I said enough for her to understand that my home wasn't safe. Mrs. Rodriguez listened without interrupting, taking notes in a small notebook. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Willow, what you're describing sounds like psychological abuse. Have you considered talking to a counselor or calling the teen crisis line?" The word abuse hung in the air between us. I'd never called it that before, but hearing someone else say it made everything feel more real, more serious, more frightening. 2 days later, I made a mistake that would change everything. I needed notebooks for a history exam, so I stopped by the house after school to grab them from my room. I figured Blake would still be at work and Mom would be at her job at the insurance office. The house should have been empty. But as I approached our front door, I saw 2 police cars parked in our driveway. My stomach dropped into my shoes. Had something happened to Mom? To Blake? I ran toward the house, my backpack bouncing against my back, keys already in my hand. That's when I saw Officer Janet Walsh and Officer Kevin Torres standing on our front porch, talking to my mother. Mom looked up when she heard my footsteps, and the expression on her face wasn't relief or concern. It was something I'd never seen before, a mixture of anger and satisfaction that made my blood run cold. "There she is," Mom said to the officers, pointing at me like I was a criminal. "That's her. That's Willow." "Willow Camden?" Officer Walsh asked, consulting a small notebook. "Yes, ma'am," I replied, confusion making my voice shake. "What's going on? Is everything okay?" "We need to talk to you about an incident that occurred last night," Officer Torres said. "Your mother has filed a report claiming you threatened her partner with a knife and attempted to assault him." The world tilted sideways. "What? No, I wasn't even here last night. I slept at my friend Casey's house." But they weren't listening to my protests. Officer Walsh was already reaching for her handcuffs. The next few hours passed in a blur of procedure and humiliation. I barely understood what was happening as Officer Walsh read me my rights and guided me into the back of her patrol car. The metal handcuffs felt impossibly heavy on my wrists, and the plastic seat was cracked and uncomfortable. Through the window, I watched my mom standing on our front porch with Blake's arm around her shoulders, both of them watching me being driven away like they were seeing off an unwelcome visitor. The Multnomah County Juvenile Detention Center on Southeast Morrison Street looked exactly like what it was, a place designed to house dangerous kids. The intake process was methodical and dehumanizing, photographs from every angle, fingerprints, a search of my belongings, medical questions I didn't understand. They gave me an orange jumpsuit that smelled like industrial detergent and shoes that were 2 sizes too big. "First time?" asked my cellmate, a girl named Jasmine who looked about 18 and had tattoos covering both arms. I nodded, not trusting my voice. "What did you do?" "Nothing," I whispered. "My mom said I threatened her boyfriend with a knife, but I didn't. I wasn't even home." Jasmine laughed bitterly. "Yeah, they all say we did nothing. But parents don't usually lie to get their kids arrested, you know." That night, lying on a thin mattress in a room that smelled like disinfectant and despair, I couldn't stop thinking about Jasmine's words. Parents don't usually lie to get their kids arrested. But mine had. My own mother had fabricated a story about me being violent. Me, who had never even been in a fight at school, who rescued spiders instead of killing them, who cried during sad movies. The interrogation the next morning was conducted by Detective Lisa Park and a social worker named Ms. Chun. They sat across from me in a sterile room with concrete walls and asked me to explain what happened the night before. I was at my friend Casey Miller's house, I said for the dozenth time. We were working on our senior project for AP History. I slept over. Her parents can verify this. Detective Park consulted her notes. Your mother says you came home around 11 p.m., went to your room, and then came into the living room with a kitchen knife. She says you threatened to hurt her partner Blake Morrison if he didn't leave your house. That's not true. None of that is true. She says you've been increasingly violent and defiant over the past few months. That you've threatened both of them multiple times. I felt like I was drowning. Can you please call Casey's parents? Can you check my phone records? I wasn't even there. Ms. Chun leaned forward. Willow, we're going to investigate your alibi, but I need you to understand something. Making false accusations against family members is very serious. If you're lying to us, it's only going to make things worse. I'm not lying. My voice cracked. My mom is lying. She's lying because she wants to get rid of me so she can be with Blake without any problems. The adults exchanged glances that I couldn't interpret. Detective Park closed her notebook. We'll be in touch, she said. That afternoon, Mrs. Rodriguez arrived at the detention center like an angel of mercy. Mrs. Rodriguez had brought a folder thick with printed text messages, emails, and handwritten notes. She sat across from Detective Park and Ms. Chun in the same interrogation room where I'd been questioned, but now the atmosphere felt different. Hopeful, maybe. I've been concerned about Willow for months, Mrs. Rodriguez explained, opening her folder. She's been staying after school regularly, not because she needs academic help, but because she doesn't want to go home. Look at these conversations. She spread out screenshots of our text exchanges from the past 3 months. Messages where I'd told her about Blake's controlling behavior, his verbal abuse, the way he looked at me. There were photos I'd sent her of my torn Nirvana shirt, timestamps showing I'd been texting her from Casey's house the night of the alleged knife incident. This is a pattern of psychological abuse, Mrs. Rodriguez continued. Willow has been documenting Blake Morrison's behavior because she was afraid no one would believe her. She's a straight-A student with no history of violence or behavioral problems. The idea that she would threaten someone with a knife is absurd. Detective Park studied the evidence while Ms. Chun took notes. Why didn't you report this sooner? The detective asked. Because Willow asked me not to. She was afraid it would make things worse at home. She was trying to protect her mother. Mrs. Rodriguez's voice was steady but angry. What we have here isn't a violent teenager, it's a child being systematically abused by her mother's boyfriend, and now being criminalized for speaking up about it. They released me that afternoon, but with conditions. I couldn't return home while the investigation continued. Instead, I was placed in the temporary custody of my mom's sister, Aunt Patricia, who lived in Beaverton with her husband and 2 young kids. Aunt Patricia picked me up from the detention center in her blue Honda CR-V, and the first thing she said was, "I'm so sorry, Willow. I should have known something was wrong." That night, sitting in her guest bedroom surrounded by my hastily packed belongings, I waited for my phone to ring. I thought Mom would call to check on me, to apologize, to explain that this had all been a terrible misunderstanding. I thought maybe she'd realize what she'd done and come to her senses. The phone did ring, but it wasn't Mom. "Hello, Willow." Blake's voice was calm and controlled, which somehow made it more terrifying than if he'd been shouting. "I hope you're satisfied with yourself." My hands started shaking. "How did you get this number?" "I think you know why I'm calling. If you keep running your mouth about me, telling lies to teachers and police officers, you're going to regret it. This isn't over, little girl. Not by a long shot." The line went dead. With trembling fingers, I immediately called Detective Park and told her about the threat. She instructed me to start recording any future calls from Blake or my mother. "This is exactly the kind of evidence we need," she said. 2 days later, Blake called again. This time, I was ready. I recorded every word as he detailed what would happen to me if I didn't recant my statements. His voice was cold and calculated, like he was discussing the weather instead of threatening a teenager. That recording changed everything. 6 months later, Blake Morrison was formally charged with psychological abuse, harassment, and making criminal threats. The recorded phone calls were the evidence that broke the case wide open. During the investigation, 2 other families came forward with similar stories about Blake's behavior toward their teenage daughters from previous relationships. I thought the charges would finally wake Mom up, that she'd realize what kind of man she'd been defending. I imagined her showing up at Aunt Patricia's house with tears in her eyes and apologies on her lips, ready to rebuild our relationship. Instead, she testified in Blake's defense. I'll never forget sitting in that Multnomah County courtroom, watching my own mother take the witness stand and swear to tell the truth, then proceed to lie for 20 minutes straight. She claimed I'd made everything up out of jealousy. She said I'd always been a difficult child who needed attention and couldn't handle her having a new relationship. She insisted that Blake had never been anything but kind to me, and that I was manipulative and disturbed. When the prosecutor played Blake's recorded threats, Mom actually claimed I had somehow faked them. She's very good with technology, she said, dabbing at fake tears with a tissue. She could have used one of those voice-changing apps. Kids can do anything on computers these days. The judge, the Honorable Susan Martinez, didn't buy it. Neither did the jury. Blake was convicted on all charges and sentenced to 18 months probation with a permanent restraining order. He couldn't come within 500 feet of me or contact me in any way. But Mom? She chose him anyway. Even after the conviction, even after the judge specifically noted that Blake's behavior constituted a pattern of psychological abuse designed to intimidate and control a minor child, she stayed with him. She moved out of our house where I'd grown up, where she'd raised me, and got an apartment with Blake in Vancouver, Washington. The last time I saw her was at that courthouse. As I walked past her in the hallway, she looked right through me like I was invisible. Like I'd never existed. Like 18 years of being her daughter meant less than 6 months with a man who had terrorized me. I stayed with Aunt Patricia through my senior year of high school, then earned a full scholarship to Portland State University to study psychology. I wanted to understand how a mother could choose an abuser over her own child. I wanted to help other kids who found themselves trapped in similar situations. Today, at 22, I work as a peer counselor at a crisis center for teenagers. I give talks at high schools throughout Oregon, sharing my story with kids who think no one will believe them when they report abuse. I tell them that survival is possible, that speaking up is worth it even when the people who should protect you don't. There are still nights when I wake up from dreams about that courthouse, about the look in Mom's eyes when she chose Blake over me. But then I get up, breathe deeply, and remember that I'm no longer that scared 16-year-old girl who had to beg for protection in her own home. I survived. I'm thriving. And I'm helping others do the same. Some stories don't have happy endings with family reconciliation and tearful apologies. Sometimes the happy ending is simply this: you survive, you heal, and you use your pain to prevent others from suffering the same way. That's enough. That's everything.